Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. Just a quick programming note on this one. Okay, this one is going to be Real Talk with Lynn, a.k.a. Butterflies of Wisdom, because I have the fabulous podcast host of Real Talk with Ashley. And on the occasion, Ashley uses, let's just say, expletives. So I'm going to put an expletive next to Ashley's interview. So if you guys see that, don't listen to it with your kids. Don't listen to it with your kids. Listen to it with your headphones in and listen to it by yourself. That's all I'll say about it. But other than that, we're going to try and keep it as clean as we can. Just throwing that out there. That on the occasion, she uses expletives on her show, but she's going to try and keep it as clean as she can. But I want to make her feel comfortable. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Ashley take it away.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
It's very nice to have you, Ashley. And please explain more of what you do and why you started the podcast. I know you mentioned that publicly on your podcast. You just wanted to start a podcast as a 30-day thing and see if you could do it. But then it turned into a huge thing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because it's been almost a full year now. End of March is actually the full year mark, so that will be the 365th episode of Real Talk with Ashley. So kind of going off of what you just shared, I originally started the podcast last March after just going for a little bit of a walk around my neighborhood, and I just kind of got this idea or this thing that came over me that said, why not start doing daily audios? Because I like to challenge myself. I'm always like looking for something else, looking for another thing to try. And I've done a lot of different things over the years, but podcasting, I obviously have heard of podcasting. I actually was considering doing a completely different show, probably like 2 years ago prior to starting Real Talk with Ashley, but it just never took off because it just didn't feel as good in the moment. And when I just kind of went into it thinking, okay, let's just do a daily audio. Like you said, it was initially a little fun challenge for myself just to see, like, let's just kind of incorporate this into your daily life because I'm already on social media all over the place. I already write a lot. So I took this as an opportunity to kind of seek out another form of medium to kind of get my message out there, to be able to share my life. And after about 7 days of doing a solo episode, just for myself, like just for shits and giggles, and then it was on SoundCloud. And from there, I'm like, you know what, let's just go to iTunes. Like, why not? Put it on iTunes, got the approval notification from iTunes or Apple after like 48 hours of submitting. And from there, I mean, it's steamrolled into what it is now. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that it's like the most successful yet or the most awesome thing out there, but what I really aim to do is just let people know that they don't have to like hold back, because my bigger why or my bigger kind of mission, if you call it, is to always leave people feeling a little bit better than I find them, and whatever engagement that comes through, if it's through a tweet, if it's through an Instagram, if it's through a Facebook or a video or my podcast or anything I write or any email exchanges I have or even people on the street, I always want people to feel a little bit better, even if it's just like that simple exchange of like saying thank you to my coffee, like my barista, or having like just that eye exchange on a bus or on a subway or when I'm walking through the street. So that's kind of my bigger picture, like why. And I think it's something that many humans have because everyone wants to be heard, everyone wants to be seen, everyone wants to have that in their life. And that's really what I'm aiming to do. And with the podcast, as you very well know, it's so off the cuff. I never script anything. It's literally just my thoughts every single day. And the funny thing that happened about a month into doing it every single day for myself, so I kind of excelled beyond the initial 30-day challenge. It went on iTunes. It started getting lots of reviews. Things started happening slowly but surely. And after the first month is when I started getting a lot of interview requests for people that actually wanted me to interview them on my podcast, even though it started out as a traditional, like just solo 7-day-a-week show. I started getting people that wanted to come on. So I actually started sprinkling in a couple guests here and there, did about 10 to 15 guest interviews over the course of last summer, and kept on going with this, like the solo episodes, because for whatever reason, people like it. People connect with me, and it's all about just being authentic. And everyone says being authentic, like be authentic, be yourself, but it's really the process and the journey and just kind of learning who you are and kind of getting out of the noise from everyone else out there, whether it's your family or your colleagues or friends or whoever, or even just like social media people. It's really coming back to yourself and knowing that you have a story to share. That's really what it's all about. We all have something to share. We all have gone through many ups and downs, and I never like to kind of just go at it with the negative because I'm very positive. And even in my darkest times, I almost got evicted. I got rejected from food stamps. I mean, I've had so many like ups and downs over the last, like 10 years. But through this, everything I'm doing is just sharing myself and letting people know that you don't have to be perfect to put something out there, because I think there's a lot of stigma that kind of goes out on social. You see all the filtered images, or you think that you're not good enough, or even if you have someone from your past that's telling you that you're not smart enough or good enough, like whatever is kind of coming at you, or it could be like your own self-doubt, because that's something I get asked a lot of. How do you have the confidence to share yourself on a podcast every single day without having a script, without having a plan? And to me, it's just more so about sharing myself as an authentic human being. And if it inspires or motivates or touches someone, then that makes me feel really, really good. And the constant engaging, like just, I love nothing more. And my listeners will know this about me. Like I love connecting with people. It doesn't matter what social outlet. It doesn't matter if it's in person or virtual, like having our connection right now. To me, it's all about having that ability to connect and just know that it's like no one's perfect. And I always say that on the podcast. It's like, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning as I go, but you can't let that stop you. And I started the podcast out last March, literally without a plan. I started it on just my iPhone, like literally just iPhone and headphones, nothing fancy. Like I obviously have worked my way up to getting better equipment and getting better like things to have in the background, but anyone can start it, because most people nowadays have an iPhone or an Android. Like you have access to some format of recording your voice, or even if it's not, maybe recording your voice is not for you. Maybe you prefer the writing. I write too. But it's just kind of that constant ability of sharing and seeing what happens, because now, after doing it for almost a year, I get so many people that email me that say that my podcast really touched them, or they'll kind of recall. They'll be like, well, remember that episode from like 145? Like I just listened to that one and it really struck a chord with me. So by constantly being consistent and constantly just being yourself and sharing yourself, like even the ups and downs, like obviously I always bring it back to gratitude, but I'm open, like I'm an open book. So even going on interviews, like I always kind of share what's actually happening, or this is what I've been through to get to where I am. And obviously it's still not perfect, but no one's perfect. So that's kind of where the podcast started. And now, like I said, it's been almost a full year of doing it, and it's been amazing.
Now, okay, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and then if you don't feel comfortable answering them, please don't answer them. But I'm going to ask you this one. And first I'm going to ask you the difficult one, and then I'm going to ask you the easy one. What has been your favorite podcast episode you have done?
Oh, man. I love all of them. I can't really pick just one, because they're all so completely different. And the interesting thing is, because I do it all myself, like the whole podcasting process, the editing, the show notes, the booking of guests when they come on, I listen to it because I have to listen to it for the show notes, but I forget every single episode I've done. So I would say, like, I love them all because I love doing it so much that every single day it's something different.
Well, okay. Where can people start listening to your podcast? Could they just pick any Real Talk with Ashley, or do you want them to start in a particular podcast? Well,
yeah, I mean, they can start their journey whenever they feel called to. Like, I'm getting new people kind of come into the mix whenever they find the podcast. But I also have the top charts on my website. If you just go to highvibelikewhat.com, that's the podcast website. It's a little confusing because it's called Real Talk with Ashley, but that's the domain that it sits on. And there's actually an explanation about that. Might change it later. I've kind of shared that on the show as well. But for right now, that's the domain. So on that website, there's a link on the top menu nav that says top charts. And those are always going to be published last day of every single month, and that's going to actually be the roundup of the top 10 episodes, the most listened to, the most downloaded, whatever verbiage you want to go by. Those are the top 10 listened to episodes from that month. So right now I have February 1st to February 28th. So this last month, if you click on that page, I have the top 10 most listened to episodes from February. And same thing for this month. Like, once we get to March 31st, I'll be releasing the new 10 episodes from March, the most listened to episodes for the course of March. And obviously the podcast can be found all over all the platforms. It's on YouTube, it's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, it's on Google Play. Also, it's right on the website.
it's right on the website. I don't know how I came across Real Talk with Ashley. Oh, I know how. I was subscribing to another podcast, and I hit relate it, and Real Talk with Ashley came up. So you guys, if you go search for a podcast, you can go search for Real Talk with Ashley, and then if you hit relate it, it brings up similar podcast to what you were originally searching for.
That's cool.
So there's a tip for you guys. Just type in Real Talk with Ashley, and or just type in any podcast and then hit relate it to that podcast, and you might be lucky Real Talk with Ashley may come up, or as we said, it's all over the planet of podcasting. So what is your favorite podcast that you can recommend that my listeners listen to?
My own? I'm going to say Real Talk with Ashley.
Aha. Bias, but that's okay. Bias, but that's okay. So you don't necessarily listen to podcasts.
No, I mean, I listen to shows that I've been on, like, to get familiar with their styling or, like, what they're up to, but I don't listen to a lot. I listen more to music, so.
Isn't that surprising? Well, let's go the music well then, because people have iTunes on their cell phones. What's your favorite band?
Favorite band? It's hard to say because I have such an eclectic taste in music that I'm all over the place. I range from, like, disco, like 1970s, all the way to, like, hip-hop and pop. Like, I have so many different favorites. I really like The Weeknd. I like Future. I mean, I'm all over the place. That's why I put out a monthly playlist on Spotify, because I'm always listening to new things.
Yes. And who do you host your podcast with?
Right now I'm with Blueberry.
Blueberry. But you're with Blueberry. Good, because I was going to say if you hosted a dance thing on SoundCloud, you would be up to the creek without a paddle, because SoundCloud is going down slowly but surely. So I wanted to make sure that Real Talk with Ashley still stayed on its feet.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I've had to upgrade because I've got a lot of space. Like, I need to have extra space because when you do a daily show, it's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so, what is your favorite book, if you have any?
I was just asked this question, and I'm going to say the same thing. I really liked the Berenstain Bears.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What generation are you? Which, the 80s generation?
I was born in the 80s, so.
Okay. The 80s generation. The 80s generation. Well, I'm the 80s generation too. And I'm the end of the 80s, early 90s, born in 87. I am almost 30 years old. So the Berenstain Bears, if you guys don't know what the Berenstain Bears is, it's a children's book, by the way. And the Berenstain Bears was part of the 80s generation. So yes, I would say my favorite all-time children's book is one of the Berenstain Bears books, because that's the 80s generation. So
yeah, I collected many of those when I was little.
You collected many of those when you were little. Jesus. Okay, you're open book. But really, you're open book. And so, is your family supportive of this podcast?
I'm not going to go into that.
Well, I just thought I would ask. So, they are okay with it, but they are not okay with you being so open?
That's a tricky, conversation. I mean, that's a whole separate episode.
That's a whole separate episode. Well, I think you need to now have that on your podcast, just my suggestion, so that people know, because your podcast is so open and real. It's interesting. Someone asked me that same question on an interview, and I just thought I would ask you.
Got it.
Someone asked, as I said, he asked all it. Tell you who it is, Joe Pardo of the Dreamer podcast. He asked all his interviewees, is your family and friends supportive of this podcast? And so I just thought I would ask you if they were, but if, as I said, if you don't want to speak about it, you don't have to speak about
it. Yep.
Yep. As she said, yep. So what, if you had to be educated by anyone, who would it be and why?
That's a hard question. Kind of feel like I'm just a student of life. So when you go through life and you have ups and downs, you're always learning along the way. I think you just learn by trying different things. It's more like I'm self-taught in many regards in different arenas of website design or HTML or podcasting. I'm such a self-taught person that I really like to be in the actual thing, doing it. So it's kind of hard to say one person that would teach me, because I teach myself.
So you're a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think we all are. I think we're all lifelong learners.
Well, that's a good point. I am a lifelong learner too, but at the same time, I have people that inspire me, and I have people that I want to be educated by. But being a lifelong learner is a good thing too.
Yeah, and I mean, people teach you. I mean, relationships and just humans in general. As part of just being a lifelong learner, you're always learning different things about different people and different situations.
Well, where can people find you, and where can people hang out with you? I know you're very active on all over the place, and I know your podcast is all over the place.
Yeah, for the podcast, like I said, it's just going to be Real Talk with Ashley. You can look it up on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube. Websites are going to be highvibelikewhat.com, and then my main website where you can also find more of my writing or other like speeches or press or other things I've got going on. You can go to Daring Ashley, DARING, Ashley.com. And then for social, I'm pretty much the same across the board, like Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, what other ones. I'm all over the place. It's usually A Taylor Y, and then same thing on Facebook.
And I'm presuming A Taylor Y is hooked up to your podcast website, and I have your website, and I'm presuming that your podcast is hooked up to your main website also.
Yep.
Yep. So you guys can find Real Talk with Ashley in iTunes. As we said, that's how I found it. And now I'm going to let Ashley ask me 2 to 3 questions about anything.
I'd love to hear how you started this podcast.
I started this podcast. Well, I wrote a book when I was 23 years old, and I wrote my biography at 23 years old. And that's how I started this podcast. 2 weeks after the book came out, people not only did it hit #1, but people started asking me, how do you do all this amazing stuff with a disability? And I thought, okay, if I turn on the podcast and like one more time and explain to people I have hemiplegia cerebral palsy, people are going to tune me out. Well, turns out 4 years later, podcast switch in the midst of it, I have got 30,000 and some odd downloads. I'm getting 100 and 500, in between 100 and 500 downloads per episode. So that's how I started this podcast based off my book.
That's great.
And do you have any other questions for me?
I guess my last question would be, do you have any like words of wisdom to impart on someone that's kind of on the fence of starting something?
Never, ever, 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 ever give up. And especially when you're a new podcaster, don't go past the 7 podcast episodes and then give it up. Because once you start something, you have to complete it. And even if it snowballs into a podcasting journey that you never expected, never, ever, ever give up. Put episode 1 out, put episode 2 out, put episode 3 out, put episode 4 out, put episode 5 out, put episode 6 out, put episode 7 out, put episode 8 out, put episode 9 out, put episode 10, and never, ever, ever give up if you want to start a blog or if you want to start a podcast.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's all about consistency, and you have to have that passion.
You have to have that passion. You have to have that passion. And I appreciate, Ashley, I appreciate your time. And this podcast has been sponsored by Grace by Grit. Grace by Grit is a athletic line out of California. And Grace by Grit is giving you guys 20% off. And this podcast has also been sponsored by Go Kitter, KITTER, as in tweet. So what Kitter is a Twitter app that you guys can either compose tweets or they have pre-made tweets, but what they do is take the trending hashtags and put them with your tweets, and so they also kind enough to sponsor this podcast, and that information will be found in the show notes along with Ashley's information, and I thank Ashley so much for coming on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.